state your full name. Larry Michael Duran, MD. What is your business address? 25982 Dana Bluffs, Capistrano Beach, California, 92624. What is your profession? Eye surgeon. How long have you practiced at this address? Approximately 2 years. Where did you practice before that? Los Angeles, California. At what address? 405 Gailey, Los Angeles. We subsequently built a new office. Any prior practice address before that? No. Have you ever had your deposition taken before? Once before. What was the nature of that case? It was a case arising out of an incident where I was working in the emergency room during my residency training, and a fellow had cut his fingers with a saw, and I had repaired the laceration. Subsequently, depositions were taken, and after that, the case was dropped. Were you a defendant in the case? Yes. I'd like to explain to you the basic purposes of a deposition. It's part of the discovery procedure, which allows all the attorneys an opportunity to get together and find out what evidence there is. It's basically to find out the information. I'm asking you questions, and we appreciate your answers. Please, though, wait until I complete each question before you give me your response. Please speak audibly and avoid nodding your head in response. If a question calls for a yes or no answer, please say yes or no. Don't nod your head one way or the other. If you don't understand any question, please let me know and I'll rephrase it hopefully in a way you can understand it. If you answer a question, it will be assumed that you did understand it. Do you understand all these cautions? I do. Also, after today, you'll get an opportunity to read your testimony in booklet form. You can make any changes, be they of substance, grammar, or spelling. However, at the time of trial, any changes you make can be commented on, especially a substantive change. So it's best that you carefully respond and then review the deposition when you have it in the booklet. What is your school background? I went to Duke University, undergraduate, in North Carolina. I then graduated from New York University, School of Medicine, the University of Virginia, and I did 3 years of eye surgery training as my residency. I then did a corneal fellowship at John Wilmer Eye Institute at USC, and then went into private practice. What were the dates of your fellowship at USC? July 77 to June 78. What were the dates of your residency at the University of Virginia? July 74 to June 77. What year did you graduate from medical school? 74. What year did you graduate from Duke? Undergraduate, 68. And you are now board certified in ophthalmology? Yes. When did you become board certified? Approximately 1979. Dr. Duran, did you ever meet a person named Harold Parton? Yes, I did. Did you ever treat him in any capacity? Yes, I did. When was that? Mr. Parton was referred to John Wilmer Eye Institute when I was a corneal fellow, and he was admitted on or about December 7, 1977. I'd like to go through selected medical records of Harold Parton from the John Wilmer Eye Institute. I made copies of the records I'm reading from for you. I'd like to start with the emergency room report. That's what's in front of you. At the bottom of the first page, it says emergency report. Yes. Did you treat Harold Parton in the emergency room? No, I treated Mr. Parton when he was referred to John Wilmer Eye Institute. Is that your signature at the bottom of the first page? Yes. Dr. Duran, can you read through the emergency report and tell me if you recall seeing Mr. Parton on the date he was admitted to USC? I think the top of this emergency room report has a date that looks like 12, and there's some number, and then 77. Do you recall what day he was admitted to USC? I don't recall specifically the exact date. I do not recall the circumstances and the general condition of Mr. Parton's eye. Okay, perhaps without reading this first, what was Mr. Parton's condition when he was first admitted to USC? When Mr. Parton was first admitted to, when I first saw Mr. Parton at John Wilmer Eye Institute, he was in considerable pain in his left eye with a very, very reduced vision. And there was a white deposit on his left cornea, a corneal ulcer, and severe inflammation. That was the situation when I first examined him. If you can now read over this emergency report to yourself, let me know whether there's anything in there that adds to your recollection that's significant. The history of the previous treatment and what Mr. Parton had experienced, is very significant because that was what caused the condition to some measure, to the degree to which he was in at the time I examined him. So I'm not sure if you want me to explain the entire situation, the history as I got it from the patient. Well, I'd like to go into your opinion of causation later on. Right now, I'd just like to go through what treatment Parton received at USC. Mr. Parton was admitted subsequent to my examination and examination by several other doctors who were responsible for Mr. Parton's care, at which point he stayed in the hospital approximately 2 weeks and received treatment for his corneal ulcer and severe inflammation of the left eye. Excuse me, Dr. Duran, you're reviewing some notes to the left of you. Are those notes you made previously to your deposition? Yes. Did you review all this documentation before? Yes, I've seen these. Are you talking about this form? No, the notes. This is a summary of dates for me to more easily recall all the information I have reviewed in the past. Dr. Duran has reviewed all medical records we had of Harold Parton in this matter, and he also has a few notes based upon his review of the records. We'll be happy to show you or make copies of his own notes that he has with him now. Now that's quite all right. Are those records that you had supplied to Dr. Duran through the office? That's right. Thank you. Dr. Duran, did you have a further response to your comments on the emergency reports? No. I'd like to turn to the document which is labeled Ophthalmology Admission History and Physical Exam. Can you read this through to yourself and tell me whether there is anything you can add to your previous answers on Parton's condition when he was first admitted to USC? I'm assuming you recognize that this is not my workup. And do you recognize whose handwriting this is? No. May I explain? Sure. It is normal function at John Wilmer Eye Institute for the residents, the fellows, and the attending staff to examine a patient who is admitted in many instances. Let's try that one again. Examination by plaintiff's attorney. Please state your full name. Larry Michael Duran, MD. What is your business address? 25982 Dana Bluffs, Capistrano Beach, California, 92624. What is your profession? Eye surgeon. How long have you practiced at this address? Approximately 2 years. Where did you practice before that? Los Angeles, California. At what address? 405 Gailey, Los Angeles. We subsequently built a new office. Any prior practice address before that? No. Have you ever had your deposition taken before? Once before. What was the nature of that case? It was a case arising out of an incident where I was working in the emergency room during my residency training, and a fellow had cut his fingers with a saw, and I had repaired the laceration. Subsequently, depositions were taken, and after that, the case was dropped. Were you a defendant in the case? Yes. I'd like to explain to you the basic purposes of a deposition. It's part of the discovery procedure, which allows all the attorneys an opportunity to get together and find out what evidence there is. It's basically to find out the information. I'm asking you questions, and we appreciate your answers. Please, though, wait until I complete each question before you give me your response. Please speak audibly and avoid nodding your head in response. If a question calls for a yes or no answer, please say yes or no. Don't nod your head one way or the other. If you don't understand any question, please let me know, and I'll rephrase it hopefully in a way you can understand it. If you answer a question, it will be assumed that you did not understand it. If you answer a question, it will be assumed that you did understand it. Do you understand all these questions? I do. Also, after today, you'll get an opportunity to read your testimony in booklet form. You can make any changes, be they of substance, grammar, or spelling. However, at the time of trial, any changes you make can be commented on, especially a substantive change. So it's best that you carefully respond and then review the deposition when you have it in the booklet. What is your school background? I went to Duke University undergraduate in North Carolina. I then graduated from New York University School of Medicine, the University of Virginia, and I did 3 years of eye surgery training at my residency. I then did a corneal fellowship at John Wilmer Eye Institute at USC and then went into private practice. What were the dates of your fellowship at USC? July 77 to June 78. What were the dates of your residency at the University of Virginia? July 74 to June 77. What year did you graduate from medical school? 74. What year did you graduate from Duke, undergraduate? 68. Are you now board certified in ophthalmology? Yes. When did you become board certified? Approximately 1979. Dr. Duran, did you ever meet a person named Harold Parton? Yes, I did. Did you ever treat him in any capacity? Yes, I did. When was that? Mr. Parton was referred to John Wilmer Eye Institute when I was a corneal fellow, and he was admitted on or about December 7, 1977. I'd like to go through selected medical records of Harold Parton from the John Wilmer Eye Institute. I made copies of the records I'm reading from for you. I'd like to start with the emergency room report. That's what's in front of you. At the bottom of the first page, it says emergency report. Yes. Did you treat Harold Parton in the emergency room? No, I treated Mr. Parton when he was referred to John Wilmer Eye Institute. Is that your signature at the bottom of the first page? Yes. Dr. Duran, can you read through the emergency report and tell me if you recall seeing Mr. Parton on the date he was admitted to USC? I think the top of this emergency room report has a date that looks like 12, and there's some number, and then there's 77. Do you recall what day he was admitted to USC? I don't recall specifically the exact day. I do not recall the circumstances and the general condition of Mr. Parton's eye. Okay, perhaps without reading this first, what was Mr. Parton's condition when he was first admitted to USC? When Mr. Parton was first admitted to, when I first saw Mr. Parton at John Wilmer Eye Institute, he was in considerable pain in his left eye with a very, very reduced vision. There was a white deposit on his left cornea, a corneal ulcer, and severe inflammation. That was the situation when I first examined him. If you can now read over this emergency report to yourself, let me know whether there's anything in there that adds to your recollection that's significant. The history of the previous treatment and what Mr. Parton had experienced, is very significant because that was what caused the condition to some measure, to the degree to which he was in at the time I examined him. So I'm not sure if you want me to explain the entire situation, the history as I got it from the patient. Well, I'd like to go into your opinion of causation later on. Right now, I'd just like to go through what treatment Parton received at USC. Mr. Parton was admitted subsequent to my examination and examination by several other doctors who were responsible for Mr. Parton's care, at which point he stayed in the hospital approximately 2 weeks and received treatment for his corneal ulcer and severe inflammation of the left eye. Excuse me, Dr. Duran, you're reviewing some notes to the left of you. Are those notes you made previously to your deposition? Yes. Did you review all this documentation before? Yes, I've seen these. Are you talking about this form? No, the notes. And this is a summary of dates for me to more easily recall all the information I have reviewed in the past. Dr. Duran has reviewed all medical records we had of Harold Parton in this matter, and he also has a few notes based upon his review of the records. We'll be happy to show you or make copies of his own notes that he has with him now. That's quite all right. Are those records that you had supplied to Dr. Duran? Well, through our office, that's right. Thank you. Dr. Duran, did you have a further response to your comments on the emergency reports? No. I'd like to turn to the document which is labeled Ophthalmology Admission History and Physical Exam. Can you read this through to yourself and tell me whether there is anything you can add to your previous answers on Parton's condition when he was first admitted to USC? I'm assuming you recognize that this is not my workup. Do you recognize whose handwriting this is? No. May I explain? Sure. It is normal function at John Wilmer Eye Institute for the residents, the fellows, and the attending staff to examine a patient who is admitted. In many instances, and I feel confident saying this is a workup by one of the residents who would be involved in the case, and then there would be staff guidance and monitoring of the case and responsibility as well. 200 for voice for 15 minutes. Cross-examination by defense. Now, can you see in Defense Exhibit F where he was when you exited the hotel? He was into the street slightly in San Julian Street because he fell roughly in this area, indicating for the record, Your Honor, appears to be in the middle of the street. Is that a trash can? Kind of right where the parking lane right here, roughly in the front, not quite all the way because this is, from this angle, it's kind of hard to get the depth of it. But he came out here in this area where you park a car at. All right. Can you show me again? Sure, right when you come out, roughly when you park a car, maybe it was slightly north of the doorway there. And so he was still in front of the hotel, but near the northern end of the front of the hotel into the street. He was not quite all the way up to the northern portion of the hotel though. Still in front of the hotel in a northerly direction, but in the street? Yes, sir. Okay, and just to the extent that you can put a mark on defense A, would you mark where he was? Obviously, it won't be exactly to scale. This is at what point in time? At the point that Officer Nagel first observed him after Officer Nagel exited the hotel. Roughly there. It's hard to tell because this, like I said, it would be more toward where the car would be, where some of them park a car. This kind of represents in the middle of the street there. Okay. And what was he doing when you first observed him after you exited the hotel? Looked like he was running. He basically was running, then made a tossing motion with his left hand, and then he fell. Now, did you say, when Mr. Kahn was asking you questions earlier, that he was near a tree at the time you observed him making the tossing motion? I don't recall seeing him near a tree. I recall seeing when he ran around the light pole. I believe this is the light pole here, and then fell again. But I don't, indicating for the record the light pole. And when was it that he ran around the light pole? That's pictured in Exhibit F. And this is the one with the no parking sign attached to it. Yeah, I think it's a light pole. And that was after he got up, after actually falling the first time. It's either he kind of dodged behind it or ran around it, trying to run away. And then he fell, went out on the street, fell again. I guess I am a little confused. And describe for me his movements from the time you first observed him when you exited the hotel. When I exited, I was up here on the landing where I could see him. But I don't know if it was through the doorway, metal doorway, or out in the open itself. He appeared to be in motion as if he was running. And when I first saw him, he made a tossing motion with his left hand and then fell to the pavement, got up, went around the light pole, or kind of, I don't know how you would say it, kind of used the light pole just as coverage and ran back into the street and fell again because Officer Glenn was running after him when he was at the light pole. So I don't know if he was kind of trying to misdirect Officer Glenn with the light pole or if he ran around it, but he was back out in the street and fell. And so when you observed him, he was in the street and then he got up and ran up onto the sidewalk and then came back in the street? Yes. Indicating for the record, Your Honor, I am pointing to defense A and made a motion towards what would be the sidewalk if I had drawn one, and then indicating a circular kind of path coming back into the street. Now, where was it that you saw him make the tossing motion? When I saw him, he was, like I said, it was as soon as I first saw him. So it would be roughly right in the street where the car was at. That's the way I recall it, right in the street where the car parking lane would be at. So essentially, where you indicated you first observed him, yes sir, when I first came out. And on defense A, that would be where you put the X, yes sir. And did you see where whatever he tossed fell to the ground? No sir. Now, you were the last one who exited the San Julian, is that right? Yes sir. And where were Officers Glenn and Murphy when you exited the hotel? I think they were in the street or right by the street. I am not sure. I really wasn't paying attention to them so that I can recall exactly where they were at. They were in front of you, weren't they? Yes, sir. So it would have been difficult for you not to see them, true? Yes, sir. But you don't know where they were? Well, I wasn't focusing in on them. Who received the baggie? Officer Murphy. And you're talking about a waste bag? Yes. The baggies, Officer Murphy. And did you see him recover the baggies in the area where I saw him have them in his hand afterwards, not pick them up exactly up? No. And I believe you testified that you saw him throw a pouch when he fell the second time. It was kind of like, I don't know if it was a throwing or pushing motion. Where was he at that time? Roughly on the east side of the street, almost in the lane of traffic, roughly in this area right here, indicating for the record just a little bit further out in the street from where he fell the first time. So he was in about the same area that he was in when you first observed him, but farther out in the street, farther out, and I think a little bit north. And where did the pouch land? It was roughly over in the gutter area right here. I don't think it was exactly up against the curb. I don't really recall, but it was towards the gutter. Indicating for the record, Your Honor, that Officer Nagel pointed in the area of the gutter near the trash can. Might have been a little south. I am not exactly sure, but it was in that general area. And you recovered the pouch, is that right? Yes, sir. By the way, you said you didn't see Officer Murphy recover the 2 packages with the cocaine in it, but did you see where he was when he recovered that? I am not sure if it was in the street. I mean, he was in the street, but I am not sure exactly where it was, like in the parking lane, toward the gutter, that area right there. Like I said, that's when I saw him with it. But when he picked them up, no, I did not see that. And when he threw well, let me ask you this. When you first observed him in the street, when you exited the hotel, he was going in a northerly direction, kind of a north, maybe a northwesterly direction or so. So his back was towards you a little bit. I could see part of his right side, and he tossed these objects with his left hand. Is that right? Well, like I said, I saw him make a tossing motion. I didn't see the objects come out of his hand per se, but I knew that's what they were. Okay. Now, before he left the hotel area, did any one of the officers who were there in the hotel, including yourself, ever attempt to stop him? I don't know how far he got behind Officer Murphy and Officer Glenn, because he turned around. And when I was pushing after them, they might have reached out for him. I don't know. May I have just a moment, Your Honor? Yes. Officer Nagel, when I asked you earlier if Officer Murphy or Officer Glenn observed these objects in his hand, I believe you said you didn't know. Is that true? Yes, sir, that's correct. Do you recall whether you wrote in the police report that either Officer Murphy or Officer Glenn observed these objects in his hand? I don't know. I might have. I might not have. I don't know. You don't recall? No. May I approach, Your Honor? Yes. I would like to show you a document. If we could put on the record what document that he is using to refresh his memory, I will ask him if he recognizes it. Yes, it's page 2 of 4 of the arrest report narrative. And did you write in the police report whether any of the other officers observed him holding these objects in his hand? Yes, I wrote this. We observed defendant held 2 small suspect-looking baggies containing off-white solids resembling cocaine base in his left hand. Whom does we refer to? That would be my partner and my partners and I. And so Officer Murphy and Officer Glenn also observed him holding these objects. Are you asking him whether they told him they observed it or he saw them observe it? I am not sure what your question is. And if the question is as to what he saw them observe, then I would object on the grounds of calling for speculation as to what other people saw. I don't want to ask Officer Nagel a leading question, so I am asking him, and if I didn't state it this way before, let me withdraw that question and ask this. What did you mean when you wrote, we observed defendant held 2 small baggies containing off-white solids resembling cocaine base in his left hand? I don't recall. I don't know if they told me that or not back at the station, but when I write a report, oftentimes we'll put we in there because it's sometimes erroneous At that time, we assume, or what I will assume, is that my partner saw the same thing I did. But oftentimes, that's cleared up in court when they get up to testify what they exactly saw. And so when you wrote that, at this point, you don't know what you wrote, if it was true or not. I can't recall whether they told me or if they did see that or not, so I don't know. But you state that you write things in the police report which you're not sure of, and that you know will probably get clarified in court. Well, no. I expect them to read it over. Sometimes other officers sometimes work on assumptions because you're putting it down, exactly what you saw. So you know what you can testify to in court. And then sometimes there was occasions where I have been mistaken, where my partner didn't see something, and that it can be cleared up later in court. But at this time, you're not sure what you meant when you wrote that. I don't recall. Like I said, I don't recall whether they told me that or not, so I am not sure. If Officer Murphy and Officer Glenn observed him holding these Ziploc baggies in his hands, that would have meant they would have had to observe that before he went out the front door. Isn't that true? I don't know what they observed because, like I said, I can't recall whether they told me that, if it's error. It's something that I assume that they saw, so I don't know. Well, when I asked you earlier whether you read the police report and whether it was a true and accurate statement, you said that it was. Isn't that true? Yes, sir, that's true. And you didn't say it was a typographical error at that time, did you? Objection, argumentative, sustained. At the time you reviewed the police report, I think you said it was yesterday or today, you didn't feel that that was an error, did you? I still don't feel there is any errors. I don't know as far as that. At this point in time, you are asking for my present recollection. It could be a typographical error. It could be made a full assumption on their part, or it could be they told me that. I just don't recall which it is. And so it could have been that you just assumed that he was holding his baggies and put it in the report then. Objection. Asked and answered. Sustained. Actually, I didn't ask it, Your Honor. Officer Nagel said it could have been an assumption on my part, and now I am asking him whether that's true. He just said it, so I think we need to speed things along here. I have nothing further of Officer Nagel subject to recall. I just have a couple questions, Officer Nagel. If you are standing right there at the witness stand, and assuming that that's the foot of the steps, can you point to a spot where you believe the door would be? The white door to your, to your left, correct? Say this was this portion right